87% of realtors get into the business and get out of the business in 2 years. That doesn't exist in our world.
We have massive visions around growing our businesses, and we are always looking to add talent to our world. We do everything in our power to ensure the people we surround ourselves with defy the odds, get into production, and build massive lives for themselves.
If you are a realtor looking to get into the business, we have a blueprint for success.
With locations all across Canada, reach out to us. Let's talk about partnership and opportunities. We are looking forward to it. Welcome back to Sales Beast. We're on episode 61, and today we have the pleasure of welcoming Daniel Steinfeld on our podcast today from On the Block Realty. Welcome, Daniel. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so we're going to dive right in. I want you to tell us a little bit about you. You've been in the business for 9 years. I want to hear a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's a bit of everyone's got a unique journey, but I got my start first off, I guess, in finance in the corporate world. I worked for an accounting firm as an auditor. Super exciting, super fun. And did that for a few years, but I'll skip all the one thing led to another. But after the yada, yada, yada there, I ended up working for the Toronto Argonauts for about a decade. So the big career jump for me was working for a football team here. I split my time there, 5 years as their VP of sales, 5 years as their CFO. So got to see a lot of parts and a lot of different moving parts of a business, a pretty unique business, had a lot of fun, met a lot of people, built some cool relationships. And then from there, did go out on my own in 2013, I think it was. Did a little bit of consulting for sports teams in the interim there, and sort of the Argos became a client of mine after I'd worked for them. So that was kind of a cool transition, and did some work in sales training and sports. And from there, my wife is also in the industry, and she was in real estate back then. And we were expecting our fourth kid. And at that point, I figured, you know what, I'm going to get a real estate license because she might need a bit of a backstop here, because it's busy and because there's lots of kids. And it was an interesting thing to me. So I got a license, and then because she is independent and really good at her job, when I said, hey, do you have any clients for me? She said, go screw yourself, get your own clients, right? So sort of got inadvertently thrown headfirst into this world, which was, I think for anybody who comes from industry, whatever it is, there's a lot of parallels. Real estate, we're entrepreneurs here. So I was able to take a combination of different things I'd learned along the way, coupled with relationships I've made to build a bit of a book of business out of the gate, and just started my business that way, working with some of the folks I'd done work with in the sports world. And that is how I got my feet wet in real estate back then. Yeah, like you said, 9 years. And then for the last 6 or 7 years, the two of us, my wife and I, actually branched off and decided to build a little real estate business of our own that has been our focus since then.
That's awesome. Lots of growth in such a short period of time. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the biggest lessons that you learned coming into real estate, and maybe how some of your previous experience really helped you overcome those challenges?
For sure. I mean, I think for me, everything has been a function of relationship building and of positive attitude, but also not being complacent and taking opportunities that maybe don't seem like the fit you were looking for. That's really where everything has fallen. I'm not an accounting person, for example. I ended up in accounting out of school because for a lot of people, when you're in university and someone offers you a job, you take the job, right? So when there was a steady income there that I didn't have to worry about coming out of school, it was an opportunity worth doing. And it proved to be pretty useful in ways I hadn't pictured. You know, I wouldn't have become the person who ran finance for a football team if I didn't have that background on the accounting side. But all the experiences along the way, as cliche as it is, have really joined up, and the sum of the parts have been humongous. In coming to real estate, there's really not an aspect or an experience I've had along the way that I haven't been able to touch on. And the same rings true as I've been in real estate. Every relationship, every transaction we grow from, I've initially my approach was the same, sort of take whatever comes to you. I think a lot of new agents are that way. You don't want to walk away from business. We've learned the art of focus more recently, where now we've been able to develop niches for ourselves, and we try to teach the same thing, where I think once you understand who you are, what you like, what works for you, it's not always a case of, okay, that works, now try something new. Sometimes you build on what's working and you create systems and automation that really allows you to leverage your strengths. So that's pretty much where we're at now, is taking those things that we've done along the way. She's had a lot of experiences as well. Our agents have had a lot of experiences that they draw from. And it's a combination of building on the experiences we've had and asking and learning from the others who have had the experiences that we haven't, so that we can become as full a service individual as we can.
It's a very, very unique journey. Before you hopped on it, I see some similarities between you and someone that's actually part of our team down here. He was an executive and decided he no longer wanted to do that and got into real estate. He super successful, just like you are. I was creeping you a little bit before we came on here. You're a CPA, right?
I am, yeah. I guess I became a CPA by default. It wasn't called that. Not that I'm that old, but it wasn't called a CPA when I got it. But yeah, I guess that is what I am now. Yeah.
I'm not a CPA. My dad is a CPA. My mom did her MBA. The MBA seemed like an easier path for me, so that's the one I went down. But I've had many friends that have gone the CPA route, and it's one of the most grueling things I've ever seen anyone have to go through. How's that experience and that education prepared you for this?
It was grueling's a good word. I mean, I'm not a book smart person per se. I'm a day before the deadline guy. I'm a talk my way into a better grade guy. So I think it served me well from the perspective of my stress doesn't get too high when things are hard, but I also was kind of admittedly doing what I needed to do to get where I needed to go, and keeping my priorities in multiple places, even when I was going through that process. It was a super fun process, as fun as accounting can be. and full disclosure, anybody who's listening or watching this right now, I would not trust myself with my own taxes. So although I'm a CPA, I've taken it into experiences where I've needed to apply it. I think it's very useful, the stuff that I took out of that, to be able to look at numbers and things differently. I mentioned to you before, and I'm in my business school where I graduated from now. I'm going to be doing an event here later today, and they were gracious enough to give me a room to work out of. But yeah, this brings back memories of some of that process while I'm here right now. It was a cool process. It was, if I remember right, it was the course of 3 really big tests, not dissimilar to real estate. I mean, the content, probably not to take anything away from real estate, it was a little bit more intense. But even with that process, now that I'm through it, I can come out with the true Hollywood story, which is I didn't have the courses or the hours I needed to get the CPA. And it turned into another exercise in negotiation and relationship building just to get the letters. Because I was at a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I left there when the Argos opportunity came up about 4 months earlier than the experience I needed to get the CPA. You need to do like practical hours. And I wasn't going to miss out on an opportunity for less money, but at a dream job. So I left and spent the subsequent couple of years negotiating that some of the work I was doing at the Argos could be counted as accounting firm hours, which is not in their book of bylaws or whatever. But after a couple of years, I got the letters while I was at the Argos, and that was pretty cool. But again, it's just been a series of opportunities that I never wanted to say no to, even if they didn't seem right. Like going to the football team, less money, but once in a while. I didn't have kids yet. I wasn't married. If this doesn't work out, I'll have something to fall back on. But that's really my only criteria, is if there is an understanding of cost and benefit, and the cost in the worst case scenario isn't going to kill you, you know what, you only live once. And so it's not always worked out. I've made some pretty shitty decisions along the way, but it's net things are okay.
Yeah. One thing that really stood out to me there, you described the process of going through that accounting program and doing your U fee and whatever else you had to do as fun with a smile on your face.
Yeah.
That tells me I have a very positive mindset, because none of my buddies that have gone through that have ever described that as fun. They hated every minute of it.
Honestly, you can make anything fun. Like anything can be fun. And I mean that literally anything. I just went through the will process with my wife, making a will with a lawyer, which is a pretty morbid process. And we were laughing hysterically the entire time. Like, not that I am advising people to like poke fun at your own death or things like that, but even with accounting, I mean, I remember sitting in these rooms where we were doing audits, and they are what you think they are. Like, they're rooms of people in suits with calculators doing really boring shit. But I couldn't live that. Like, it just wasn't, the job was fine. It was interesting. But I remember there was one client that was back when, what was it? It wasn't like Napster or something. Like MP3s were like the only way to get music. And every time any member of the client would come in, I made them entrance music, like a wrestling ring. Cause like we had like nicknames for them that some of them knew and some of them didn't. But it was just like, it lightened the room. Like, that was just a really small example of something that anybody can do if it fits your personality. You don't always have to be the fun person or anything like that. But that really helped me create an environment that allowed the boring work to seem less boring. And it allowed conversation among me and the team to not always be like, well, does this have to be a debit or a credit, or what percentage do I allocate to this, whatever. It's like, I'd kill myself after like 3 days if that's what we were talking about. So instead it was like tempered with, hey, where are you going for dinner tonight? Like, whatever, just stuff to keep us sane. Because there's always something bigger and I guess more enjoyable than the stuff that's driving you crazy, whatever that is. I'm not just talking about work, just everyone's going through all kinds of crap. Our office was robbed last week. So that's just throwing that out there, like, very crappy situation. We have 4 kids. There might be a strike on Monday. These are all things that can stress us out and make us go crazy. But there is a very glass half full approach you need to take or you'll go nuts. So, yeah. And now I'm thinking about that. All of a sudden, my whole demeanor is going to be like, but that is really shitty. So,
Don't think about it.
Yeah, no.
I was going to say mindset, and then track record. Your track record is like no one else I've ever met in this business. I know you built a big business in the real estate space. When you're looking to get into business with someone, how do you determine whether or not they have a positive mindset like yourself? And is track record important to you or not?
That's an awesome question. I'm going to answer that with 2 different quick stories. Well, no, one story and one, I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's just see what I say. First of all, the number one thing for anybody we go into business with, even people we take on as clients, is fit. We need a fit. I mean, I'll say culture fit, but it's not necessarily that. It's really personality fit and an understanding that we're going to be able to work to a positive outcome with these people. And not everybody is a fit. Like, we've had, as I'm sure you have, like, you meet people who might want to do business with you and the dollars and cents make sense, but your first conversation has you dreading the next time you're going to talk to them, right? We have learned to steer clear from that for our own sanity. And it's not easy to do, especially when you're starting out or if you're starving for business. You take what's there, including the crap. And I'm not suggesting people should just say no when there's dollars in their face. But that's the first thing now, especially like when we're taking on business partners, like you said, new agents, interviews, whatever. It's really a question of, is this going to work within the context of what we're building and what we've built? Because we've made bad decisions. Like I said, we've had people who weren't a fit, and it takes going through what happens when it's not a fit to learn why that's the wrong way to go. Even though it might make you a few more bucks, the time suck, the stress that increases, the lack of fun, all these things that are important to us are not worth the few extra bucks we're going to make, at least to us. Another example is when I was with the football team. You can imagine, like, I mean, the Argos are not the big show in this city, but they were still a pretty cool place to work. And back then, more so, maybe it was a fun spot where people looking to get into sports wanted to get into. So there was always a stack of resumes a mile high for jobs that didn't exist. And when a job would come out, it would just be like this revolving door of the same greasy sports marketing grad who thinks they know everything and think they know what I want to hear. No disrespect to anybody who's like that, but it was just the same person over and over again. And my goal when I was running the sales team there, the moment you said to me, when I ask you, why do you want to work here? If you tell me it's because you're a diehard Argos fan, that's great. You know the product, but that's not what I'm looking for. If you're a diehard Argos fan, you're our customer, right? Like, you're the one I want to be selling tickets to. Go buy a ticket. What I want is people who are interested in selling. I want people who are like, and I landed up hiring, instead of the sports marketing people, I'd hire psychology students and like people who were different, right? But in a good way, like not people who went out of their way to like be weird different, but like, it was still one of those things where when you're in a competitive space, you need to break through. As agents, you're up against lots of people for listings, you're up against people in negotiations, even when you're up against other agents to get a place. It's not always the dollars and cents, it's the relationship, it's how you treat people. And so the ability that people I've worked with have, maybe because they're smarter than I am and just understand how to read what I'm looking for, that's fine. Maybe people fed me a line and it worked, but you've got to be able to break through. You've got to not be like everybody else, or by default, you just cancel out. And whoever's left, the best of those is going to be what rises to the top. Otherwise, you're just depending on someone to throw a dart and see who they get of all the same thing. So that's been my approach, is looking for the different people, the different opportunities that may not seem like the generic right answer, but have some fit that maybe the other ones don't have.
That's a really good answer. And I have a follow-up question to this and kind of our previous question, but obviously getting into business with them is the first thing, but then motivating them and keeping them accountable and keeping them on the right path to, achieving whatever they want, that's obviously even more important, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of the things that you're doing, like you said, to kind of keep the environment fun, but also, implement the business side, get them in the mindset of growing and learning and doing what they need to be doing?
Yeah, great question. I mean, real estate is a lonely business. It can be if you're not surrounded by the right people, if you're not collaborative. And I mean, your business is the same. Like, the people that you've got and the people who you surround yourself with are not just there to show up, produce, and go home. Like, you're a unit as one, and people need to feel that way. So when you talk about motivation and tough times, especially, which a lot of people have been in for, if not the last 6 months, the last 3 years, just with the weirdness of what's going on, it's important that people feel they've got sounding boards. It's important that people feel they've got communication outlets with each other, that they develop relationships beyond themselves, and that they don't feel like they're on an island. So when my wife and I built our brokerage, it was twofold. Well, part of it was the auction side, but it was also, we were with a brokerage that was not bad, but it was built on volume of as many people as possible, and not really getting to know anybody, not learning their stories, not asking what they want. And that's just not how we wanted to operate as individuals, and ultimately as people who had people working at our brokerage. So that's really what has driven motivation for us, is getting to know people and what it is that they're actually looking for. It's not always, I want to make as much money as possible, right? Sometimes it's, I want good work-life balance. I want to spend more time with my family. I want to be able to vacation 3 months a year, whatever it is. I want to be able to do this alongside my side hustle, or this is my side hustle, right? And where some of those models and things may not fit with our brokerage, and in those cases we'll say, you're a great person but not a fit here, right? It's important that if we don't know that, and these people don't know that we know that, their motivation could still be strong, but it's not where it could be, because now you've got people to whom you feel accountable, who are hopefully going out of their way to keep you accountable. And you've got a sounding board when things get tough, that instead of just saying, shit, okay, I guess this isn't working, I'm going to try something else, you can ask questions. And you've got people making sure you don't fall to that, the sort of what we call and we talk about this all the time, and it's stolen, so I don't even know what source we got it from, but we talk all the time about the valley of despair. That's like a big thing we talk about. And basically the valley of despair, if it's a visual, is kind of at the bottom of this hill. I'm sure if you look it up, it's a thing somewhere, but we call it that. Where basically you try all those things that seem like magic pills in real estate, get the lead gen software, get the this, get the that. You're going to do well the moment you buy this. And then it gets hard because none of these things they might all work, but you need to put yourself into it. So from being really excited, you drop, you get less confident. And then you get to this point where probably you're being bombarded with other new ideas and you're faced with a choice to go back to the top of the hill, start again with another new magic pill, or power through. And it's not always the right answer to power through, but we're really focused on making sure people expect that it's not going to be easy, so that when it's not easy, they don't give up. They say, okay, this was supposed to happen. This is the bottom of the hill that's followed by a track back up. So
what you're talking about here?
That's the one. That's it. It is called the Valley of Despair. Perfect. And Mount Stupid. Exactly. So yeah, this was, let's say, okay, we'll credit Dunning-Kruger. That's who we're going to credit. But yeah, like we talk about it all the time, and it's so true. And I think in telling people and showing them this, it's one great tool and visual to help people understand that they're supposed to struggle. Mm-hmm. That's part of the process.
One thing we started talking to our agents about, especially brand new agents that are just getting in the business, and Mike had a conversation, I think it was with one of our previous podcast guests, is like, you got to be upfront with them. You have to be patient. You're getting into this business. You might think you know everything, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but nice. You have to be patient. You're not going to see results immediately on day one. And I think that's what this kind of describes, is like, allow yourself to just focus on growing and learning, and then eventually you'll start seeing that slope up of actual results.
100%. Yeah, that's it. And being, like, you hit it on the head there, being honest with your people is so important, because not everybody is, right? Like, you get people who are good people who are there and trusting you. They've joined you because they've trusted you, right? And we know that we hold a great responsibility for their success, and they're trusting us with that. So you owe them that honesty, that it's not going to be easy. Totally. So, and the nice thing about that curve is it flattens out at the top. Like, when you get in that groove and you're working, all of a sudden you've probably got a system that's a lot easier to just roll with, where if you want to start packing onto it, that's fine. But yeah, I love that thing. That's good. That's the diagram.
You almost need a model like that, because I think a lot of people won't be, I don't want to say honest, but a lot of people won't provide the truth around what getting into business is like. And it's maybe not that they're being dishonest. Maybe they just forget. The top producer built a team.
You mean if right now they're successful, it's kind of like,
exactly.
It's like that. Yeah, it's
I
true.
Heard this yesterday, we forget pain pretty quickly, and it's for a biological reason. If I didn't forget breaking my arm when I was 10 years old, if I didn't forget what that felt like, I would never get back on the bike and ride the bike again. I would never get in the car and drive to the grocery store. I'd be too afraid to do it.
Yeah, it's very true.
But I like how you have a model. Because what I've noticed, it takes way longer to get into production than we'd expect. We're grossly underpaid in the beginning. I don't know about you guys, but everyone was, my mother, my father, aunts, uncles, friends, they would always ask, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Not good. Would you stop asking me?
Well, that's a good point too, because there's different levels of, like, the people keeping you accountable. There's a fine line between motivated accountability and stressing my ass out, right? And like making me want to just, like, you know what, I'm going back to accounting. Forget this, right? Because we go through, it doesn't matter how seasoned you are. Like, we all go through periods where it sucks, right? Or where we're not doing what we expect of ourselves. And so it's really important that that message that we get from people and we give to people is tempered with the understanding that we're not getting a weekly paycheck. And so the good weeks we really need to celebrate. And people don't do that enough at all in this industry. And I don't mean posting it on Facebook and being like, hey, just sold 5 billion over ask. Aren't I amazing? 7,000 offers. It's like, to ourselves, just like, we need to be able to take a minute and say, fuck, this was a good week. Or like, that was a hard client and it's done. And like, I can be happy with myself, instead of saying, thank God that's finished. Now I got to deal with all these other assholes, right? Like that's not, but too many people do that, which first of all, you shouldn't have any assholes you're dealing with. But I mean, it is what it is. I think a lot of us are inadvertently or on purpose trying to be part of the pity party and always want to be victimized by the hardest things in our lives. But honestly, if you're doing the job right, like it's going to get tough, but it's also going to get easier and you're going to have wins. Take an extra couple seconds when you have the wins to celebrate. That's something that I don't do it well enough. I don't think a lot of people do it well enough, but it's on my list of to-dos. Celebrate something.
Sure.
Some really cool things there. And I want to point out, like, even throughout this whole episode so far, I've been listening to a lot of your language, and I feel like you've probably implemented some strategies around how you talk to help train your mind into a positive mind frame. Is that something I'm picking up? And could you maybe talk about that?
Positive mindset is number one. I mean, I don't know that it was a conscious, like I haven't really taken like courses or anything, but I have, I guess by default, seen the way certain ways we act impacts the people around us and impacts our own mood, right? And I have bad days and I'm in a bad, like ask my kids, I can be a dick for sure. But you don't achieve what you're trying to achieve nearly as effectively with a negative mindset, regardless of what it is, right? It's just, I don't know if that's science or psychology. I never took psychology courses, but I mean, life experience has told me when you've got a smile on your face, at a minimum, you're going to have more smiles around you, right? Like it's just a contagious thing and it doesn't cost you anything. Like that's the other side of it to me. Like I'm also a cheap bastard. Like I've always been cheap and I try to now like get out of that, but that's not the point of this. But the point is like, I've recognized that I get just as much effectiveness out of just the way we act and the things we do versus the tools we buy and the additional investment in things with dollars and cents. So, you know, we still do that, but it's just an enhancement is what it is. The smile is like a little turbo boost on whatever you're doing, and your tone, you know, being aware of the room also, I think is important. So I guess the caveat to that is there's times where you shouldn't be super happy all the time, right? When you're in a difficult situation and you're too happy, it turns into sounding patronizing to people or condescending. And that's not the intention, but it can be construed that way. So we need to develop an ability to read the room in all situations. People you talk to are all going to react differently. And I think a lot of that also comes from active listening, which is a whole other discussion. But active listening is what drives our ability to connect with people properly. It's not the things we say, it's the things we interpret and then are able to kind of turn into conversation.
It is for sure proven. Mike and I just got the opportunity to go to the Tony Robbins event in West Palm last week, and it's the Unleash the Power event, and they actually spent like almost a full day, like 15 hours, talking about how your language, your physiology, your mindset, like those things are all so important. And if you're not focusing on them every single day, like you're way less likely to be successful. And it's proven through science, like it's statistically true.
Totally. It's a little segue, and I don't know if this is a plug, but I just noticed this morning, I've never gone viral on anything, but I've got this one reel I put up on my Instagram that somehow has gone bonkers. And it's all about what we're talking about, where I kind of candidly caught this guy who advertises pizzas for Domino's on the street. He holds the sign up and he dances for hours with the sign, like crazy, like twisting and under his leg and like getting cars pumped up. And he loves his job, or if he doesn't, he has me fooled so much. But I happened to be filming him just because I wanted to show my wife. And this woman who was walking by him, and you see her walking kind of like normal walking. And as she gets closer, she starts smiling. And when she gets next to him, she starts dancing with him. Older woman. And then she goes on her way with this huge smile on her face. And the reel was just about exactly what we're talking about. Just, it doesn't cost you anything to be happy. Like, and the impact it has, like I witnessed it firsthand. it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how insignificant something seems. Just the way that he chose not to be because we've seen people with signs who like hold it in front of their head and don't move, or like sitting on a chair and are hiding on their phone behind it. This guy just embraced the sign. And I'm sure Domino's is selling more pizzas because of him. And if not, I mean, he's going to do well in life. If he puts that much energy into putting a sign up, good for him. So anyway,
give the man a raise. Give the man a raise.
Exactly. That's all the comments are saying things like that on this thing. They're give him a raise. I want to be a pizza sign guy. I'm just like, there you go. He's glamorized something that might be considered one of those things that is kind of a job nobody really gives much thought to. So
I wouldn't be surprised if in an hour the two of you guys meet at that corner and you're both trying to recruit this guy.
Right.
Exactly. Have you ever considered real estate? It's true. We've talked about
fighting over him.
At least he could, yeah, like come to our events or something. Like he needs to be like the face of the brokerage or something. But yeah.
That's awesome.
That's funny. The first Tony event I went to, he was talking about the study, and I'm gonna butcher the stats, but he was talking about how there was a group of people that were depressed, divided up into 3 groups. One was given something, SSRIs, Prozac, something. The other was given a placebo. And the other was told that they have to stand in front of a mirror and they had to do multiple sessions of this daily and just smile at the mirror from ear to ear.
Huh.
And then they tested them a week after. I think there's some hormone in your body that can give you an understanding of your level of depression. Anyways, the smile group performed significantly better than the other 2 groups.
Really? With like net happiness kind of thing?
Yes.
Like,
yeah,
that's awesome.
There's actually a lot of studies done on that. Like, I'm just going to plug one book that I read earlier this year, The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor. I don't know if you guys have read that. It's literally like the summary of everything we're talking about and then some. So if you guys haven't read it, definitely check it out.
I think I will. I actually try to read, not many, but books. Every time people say they read books now, it's like, well, they listen to the book. But I actually try to get a book once in a while. Not really, sort of. I'm lying, kind of.
Kind of.
Like once every 6 months.
We'll put it on Audible. He's got a good narrating voice. It's good.
Okay, cool. You gave me the permission. I'm going to do that now.
All right, sounds good. I wanted to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit. I do want to chat a little bit about your auction business. I'm not sure how that works. I really want to get to know kind of what you guys are doing, and I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions. So tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, initially when we went out on our own, there was a story, which there's too many of now, but one of those stories on like CBC Marketplace, undercover at bidding wars at like offer dates. And it was the shadier agents feeding people information. And it was kind of showing the seedy underworld of blind bidding. And as part of that story, they showed how things are done in Australia, which is auctions, and kind of asked the question like, well, why can't that be done here in Ontario? And my wife and I looked at each other and we kind of said, yeah, why isn't it done here? And we kind of just went down the rabbit hole from there and realized there are a considerable number of reasons and rules and laws that preclude Ontario realtors from doing that. But we decided we're going to try to see if we can make this work, because we don't think, and as we've learned over the last 7 years, we don't think getting rid of blind bidding is the answer. I think that was initially the thing. I think people thought we were anti that. But we did think that consumers should at least have a choice for transparency where it's appropriate. So we spent a couple years building an auction platform from the ground up, which is effectively eBay for houses. I mean, not really, but that's the idea. It's an online auction platform that allows people to sell their property in an open auction online. And so it's been a really cool process along the way. We are now transitioning it into a bigger thing, which I can talk a bit about. But yeah, we've done a number of auctions in the GTA, and they've all been really cool experiences. People have bought homes knowing what the competing bids are legally. So everything's been done above board. But the journey has been incredible. Like, it's just been from our first auction, which was about as stressed out as I've been in my entire life, which had CBC in the room with us filming when after 3 days of the auction being open, there was an hour left and we had no bids. And the CBC reporter goes, "So if you get no bids, is this a massive failure?" and we're like, so this is what we worked for. But it landed up, thank God, selling in the final minutes. But it was, we've taken so many lessons. I mean, this could be 15 separate episodes, but really it was the first step in a long journey of learning how to do this properly. And right now we're in a place where we've been able to run auctions in a way that people understand, can be comfortable with, that is not just legal, but is built for our industry as much as it is for the consumer. This isn't an anti-realtor thing. And the change that we're making now, just to close the loop on that, is we have had it as a platform that we used as our brokerage to leverage as a differentiator, as a different way to sell. It's now, we're taking it out of our brokerage entirely. Our brokerage is now a consumer of it, but it's now entirely a third-party auction platform for brokerages only. Consumers can't use it. It's only a tool for when a realtor might be interested in doing this and offering this to their client. Now, this is the only accepted by RICO and AREA and TREB and CREA and all that, like the only properly done way to do it, in advance of the rules are changing April 1st also. So with the new regulations coming in and TRESA and open bidding being allowed, but nobody really knows what that means, this will be a packaged solution that just allows people to do it without worrying about what's allowed and what's not allowed. So that's where we're at right now. That was kind of the 3-minute elevator beginning to end of the last 7 years or 6 years. But yeah, ask whatever questions you want.
Well, I was just gonna say, first of all, congratulations. It's like super cool to hear other people innovating and creating strategies around buying and selling real estate. Cause I mean, there hasn't been much innovation over the past, like 50 years or so. And it's cool that you're bringing this into play. So thank you, first and foremost. And I definitely want to chat with you about how we could get involved in that.
Sure. Yeah. It's, we're kind of putting the final bows on the new brand, I guess. So it's not going to be called On the Block anymore, because that by default would associate too much. We don't want brokerages sending their clients to something that has the name of another brokerage, right? So it's a totally separate company. We just happen to be an umbrella for both, I guess. But yeah, it's really the exact same process as what people are used to with a traditional real estate. Properties are still on MLS, showings, professional like photo, all the stuff is the same. The only difference is the actual process of arriving at a price and a contract. And that's the easiest way to open the discussion about it, to help people understand. Because really any question people have about, well, what about this? What about this? Usually the answer is, well, that's the same as what you do already. So it's not meant to diminish the value of a realtor, for sure. In a lot of ways, it's meant to, on the selling side, allow a realtor to not have the stress of what that offer process might feel like for them. We're still being able to put forward all kinds of quality and a new type of product. And for buyer agents, obviously, it lets them focus on just servicing their client with valuation and advice, and not having to throw darts to guess, what are we supposed to offer? We don't know. Nobody's telling us. You'll see it. And you can actually work with your client. We've never done an auction that wasn't cooperating with another broker. So like, that's a question we've got. Like, it's not built to have people come in and try to buy properties all rogue and cut realtors out. They've all been cooperating. We've never multiple repped one of them either. So like, it's really, it's dependent on the industry to accept what it is, or it doesn't work.
Could you maybe describe what the process looks like? Maybe we could give people a scenario. So say
like the auction itself, like when somebody
maybe from start to finish. I'm mainly asking for myself.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess the first part is like, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. I want to be respectful of the podcast time. Basically, the first step is determining whether or not you've got a property that's suitable for an auction. It follows a lot of the same criteria you might have if you were considering doing an offer date versus not. If a property is not going to have competition, an auction doesn't make sense, because it's predicated on more than one person participating, or an auction just becomes somebody bidding against themselves. So it's not designed for the traditional, what people think about with an auction of like just distressed properties or luxury homes, or like these things that in North America really have been the only auction properties. it's really built for traditional resale. We have done it for distressed properties, for estates, things like that. But eliminating that misconception that it's for these particular types of properties is important, but also it's not for the property that's having trouble selling. We've had a lot of agents call us and say, I've had this property on the market for 6 months. It's not moving. Maybe an auction will work. The auction won't work, right? Like if you couldn't sell it traditionally, either your pricing is terrible or your marketing is terrible. Either way, unless you fix the elements that bring people to the property, just giving people a different way to spend money isn't going to get it done, right? Anyway, once you've got the auction though, again, the process is the same, listing agreements are the same, it's all the same, ARIA or TREB or wherever you are forms. There is an additional auction listing agreement that just lays out some of the nuances of what an auction is, because there are responsibilities of the listing brokerage, of the client, that they need to understand. Specific things, like for example, like the client's not allowed to bid on their own property to jack the price up. That's legal in Australia, strangely. That's actually something that happens a lot. It's called shill bidding. And when we saw that, so we're not doing this the way they do it in Australia. We've just learned a lot from them. But once they have that agreement signed, the process is the same, goes on MLS, marketing in all the ways that a listing agent might. The auction platform, markets it as well to, the user base that have signed up for information on auctions and things like that. And then the process is, once it gets to the auction, there is a kind of a micro site that kind of looks like an eBay page. It's just this big eBay meets realtor.ca type page. And it's got all the information about the property. It's got all the media that you'd see on realtor.ca with a bit more allowance for things that are restricted for us. So like you don't have a limit on characters or types of PDFs or whatever. So the idea is, again, being as transparent as possible with would-be purchasers. Any specific auction terms are listed there. So the key difference here is because it's an auction and because everybody by definition should be competing on an even playing field, the only variable is the price. So the terms of the auction are consistent for everybody. Usually it's a firm offer. So we'll do a pre-list inspection. And so the inspection condition is automatically waived. Financing is a bit of a trickier one now, especially. We have had auctions where everybody gets a financing condition by virtue of bidding. The only rule is you can't have some people with some things and some people with other things. Deposit is standardized. Closing date is usually a window. Pick any date in January or whatever. And then that's it. When the bidding starts, it's usually open for about 3 hours. I mentioned the first auction we did was open for 3 days. We quickly learned nobody's going to place a bid 3 days in advance, especially with the eBay mindset that I should bid at the last second. And you see the price as people make bids. You know what the minimum bid is. There's preset increments that you can go up by, so people aren't bidding up a penny at a time or anything like that. And as bids come in, you can see the bid history. Identities of the bidders is protected. And you can really do it in any number of ways. If you've got a maximum bid as a bidder, you can put that in right up front, and the system will only bid you up to the minimum you need to be at to be in the lead. But then if you get outbid, it automatically outbids people up to your maximum, is the way that it works. And the one big difference from eBay is that if there is a bid in the last 3 minutes, the clock extends. So nobody can do what you do on eBay and buy something because the clock's at 5 seconds. And just because I have a good internet connection, I bought a house, right? So the idea there is obviously to get the most money for the listing agent and the seller, but also to make sure that every buyer who might want to buy has an opportunity to go to their best number as well. So it really is a best of both worlds for buyer and seller, where by definition, buyer and seller have opposite objectives. Really, in cases that we've had, the transparency really helps get more money. It's not an affordability play. So all the stuff the government talks about with blind bidding being the reason prices are high is absolute bullshit. We have gone on record saying that. We have lobbied the government talking about that because people came to us saying, you guys know blind bidding's terrible. Like, that's why prices are high. We're like, no, like blind bidding, any bidding, like the market's going to find a way to drive prices up. And when you show people the number, prices are actually going higher because now people who otherwise don't participate because they hate blind bidding are saying, good, now I'll go to my max that I wasn't going to do there. So it's been, like I said, it's been different every time. The process after it's over, once we come to a final price, it's all the same documentation again. So as bidders, they are bound to terms that involve them subsequent to the auction signing the offer. So they're not sending us 801s and offers every time they make a bid, but they're contractually bound to populate an APS with the terms of the auction. We make the APS available for download also to buyers and their agents so they can see what they're signing. It's got the Schedule A pre-populated, the deposit, all that stuff is done with the exception of price, name of the buyer, and sometimes closing date. There's a lot more moving parts I'm forgetting, but that's the gist of it. And then everything, again, at the end goes the same process.
That is fascinating. I think we need to do another episode. And
we could do, I mean, we've got all kinds of, we've done a lot of like auction webinars for just the industry, like, because again, for us, this is built, I mean, auctions are built on competition, but the success of this is built on agents actually knowing this is an option and that it's not scary and it's not cutting them out. It's just a cool option. And truthfully, for every, I'd say 100 calls we get about an auction, we tell 80 that it's not a good fit. So we're not here to do as many auctions, because if auctions don't work, it looks bad on this process. It's under the microscope now. There's other companies, which maybe you know of, who have started doing auctions in Ontario, not as realtors. And I won't name names or anything, and we try not to talk about them, but there's been a bit of a bad stigma given to this concept because of people who aren't doing it fully within the regulations that protect consumers. So we're very careful that when we do them, it's going to work out. Right. They don't all, I think we've had a couple that don't sell, you know, you might not get bids or things like that. And it happens just like an offer date. But it has to be done properly.
For sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. Definitely super interesting. We'll have to get you on another call to chat more about that, especially as you're developing it and I guess releasing it now. When is that happening?
It looks like it's going to be a January 1st launch. Our hope was to start doing some beta stuff in December with brokerages. That might still happen, but I don't know, something about IT and development where things just, we want to make sure that what we're turning what we had into is as user-friendly and not a potential drive people away out of the gate thing as possible, right? Because that happens a lot when people beta things and everyone hates it. We want feedback, but the goal for us is to make sure it's pretty turnkey. So knock on wood, January 1st, but definitely in advance of the rules changing April 1st, this will be fully up and running.
Cool. I think this episode will probably be released by then. So we'll have an update for those listening, I'm sure, by then.
Cool. Nice.
Awesome. So I know we're running out of time here. So before we let you go, we want to give you the opportunity to plug your podcast. Tell us about Level Up, the podcast for realtors.
Yeah, I mean, it started as a different podcast where we learned that we were being idiots. It's my wife and I host it. It was originally called Balance because we thought we wanted to do a podcast about how you balance running a brokerage, 4 kids, all this stuff. But honestly, even feedback we got was like, balance is really not a thing. It's priorities are a thing and time management and all that is a thing. But we realized we wanted to, like I said, focus and niche into a specific audience. And so we're now, I think, 160 episodes or whatever. We do an episode every week and it's completely built for realtors. And it's just about it's very similar to what you guys do. It's real talk about the industry, about strategies, about stresses, successes. And it's built to just give people perspective. And I think in a lot of ways, let them know that the stuff that you see out there, like I was talking about, like the social media stuff that makes this look like everybody is living $1 million listing and selling sunset and all that. Sure, like there are successes like that, but there's the reality of our industry that is super positive and doesn't need to be that also. And everybody's at a different spot in their journey. So for us, Level Up isn't just about you're new, you need to get better, or you're experienced, you need to get better. It's about everybody's got places that we can develop and learn. And we bring guests on as well and talk about different things, whether it's social media, whether it's time management, whether it's the market itself, difficult clients, whatever. But we try to keep things relevant. and it's been really fun. It's turned into a bit of a community that we just did a session, which I know this is airing later, but we just did a session Monday, Tuesday this week, which was called Unbreak Your Business. Little homage to Tony Braxton, I guess. But that was just something we do from time to time, is just bringing people out and just helping the industry be better. I mean, Katie, my wife, she's on the board at Rico. January, I'm starting on the board in Treb. We've got, a very real love for making this industry better, right? It's not, I mean, we want our brokerage to grow, and we want all that's in auctions to do well and all that, but we've really come to learn that it's really, again, it's not just the people we surround ourselves with in our brokerage. Most of the dealings we do are with people from other brokerages in this industry. And the more we can work with people who are of like mind and, strong with integrity, it's just better. It's just more fun. So that's why we're doing the podcast. That's why we're joining these boards. That's why we decided to grow the brokerage and not just be an auction company. Yeah, that's that.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We wrap up every single podcast with the same question, and I'll give it to you now. Who do you know that we should know that you can help us get on this podcast?
Oh man, is this part of the recording, or is this like an offline conversation?
No, this is on the recording.
I was gonna say people will be mad at me if who do we know that you should talk to that should be on this podcast? There's lots of good people. You know who you should call? You're like, yes, we asked you. Only because I really like what he does. Have you guys spoken before to Mike Samra? Do you know the name?
I follow him on social media. I'll reach out to him. That's a really good suggestion. He's got a podcast with Stuart, right?
Yeah, and he runs a group called Prospecting Ninjas, where he is a resource that we've talked to him, and I love him. I mean, I now he's a guitarist and I drum with him, so now we're jam buddies as well. But he has such great perspective on cold calling and pounding it to get people, and kind of the stick-to-itness of sales that I think is really commendable. And for anybody who's got a good work ethic, you need to talk to him about how he does it. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
And I can text and send you all kinds of other names also.
That sounds good. That sounds good. I'll wait for a list from you then.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Daniel, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on. And again, this is Sales Beast Podcast.
Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling.